The storm outside raged against the towering glass windows, the wind howling like a restless beast. Inside, the atmosphere was no less tense. The millionaire adjusted his cufflinks, ignoring the nagging feeling clawing at the back of his mind. He had been through thousands of meetings before, why did this one feel different? As he grabbed his coat, a voice cut through the silence. "You can't go." He turned, eyebrows raised. His personal nurse stood in the doorway, her face unusually pale. She was a no-nonsense woman, never one to overreact. But tonight, there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and urgency. "What?" he scoffed. "You can't go to that meeting," she repeated, stepping forward. "Something is wrong. I can feel it." The millionaire let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You're feeling things now? Since when did you become a psychic?" "I'm serious," she said, her voice lower this time. "I can't explain it, but you have to trust me. If you walk out that door, you might not come back." Something about her words made his fingers tighten around the doorknob. He had hired her for medical advice, not ominous warnings. But there was a strange finality in her tone that sent an icy shiver down his spine. Still, this was absurd. He was a businessman, a man of logic and numbers. The deal waiting for him tonight was too important to back out because of someone's feeling. "I appreciate your concern," he said, turning back to the door. "But I don't make decisions based on fear." The nurse inhaled sharply, as if she wanted to say something more, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped back, shaking her head. "Then at least promise me this," she said. "Whatever happens, don't sign anything." The millionaire chuckled, pushing open the door. "You really think something bad is going to happen?" She didn't laugh. "I know it will." The drive to the meeting was quiet. Too quiet. The city lights blurred past his tinted windows, but he barely noticed. He should have already been mentally preparing for his pitch, but instead, his mind kept replaying the nurse's words. "Don't sign anything." It was ridiculous. Just nerves. Stress. That's all this was. By the time his car pulled up to the private high-rise, he had already shoved the conversation out of his mind. He stepped out, straightened his tie, and strode inside. The meeting room was already filled when he arrived. The faces around the long table were familiar: investors, executives, power players he had dealt with before. But something felt off. The air was thick, almost heavy. The kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Still, he plastered on his business smile and took his seat. "Apologies for the delay," he said smoothly. "Shall we begin?" A man at the far end of the table nodded, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Of course. But first, we need you to review these documents." The millionaire reached for the folder, then stopped. His fingers hovered just above the cover, a strange unease creeping through him. "Don't sign anything." The nurse's voice rang in his ears, louder than before. He exhaled, forcing himself to ignore the ridiculous fear. This was business. These were contracts. Nothing more. And yet, something was terribly, terribly wrong. Then, the lights flickered. And suddenly, everything changed. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows across the boardroom walls. The millionaire frowned, glancing at the ceiling. Power failures weren't common in a place like this. High-end corporate buildings had backup systems that kicked in instantly. Yet, something was off. The overhead lights flickered again, this time longer. The room dimmed into an unnatural twilight before stabilizing. He shook his head, reaching for the folder. "Apologies for the..." But as soon as his fingers grazed the cover, the world shifted. The long mahogany table in front of him blurred. The walls rippled, almost as if they were made of liquid. The faces of the executives seated around him distorted, stretching and twisting into something inhuman before snapping back into place. The millionaire's heart pounded against his ribs. He blinked, his pulse roaring in his ears. Had he imagined that? He turned to the man sitting closest to him. "Did you see that?" The man didn't react. He remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. The millionaire cleared his throat. "Did anyone else?" Then he realized, no one was moving. The room was frozen. The men and women around the table sat upright, their hands folded in front of them, their eyes staring straight ahead. Not blinking. Not breathing. His blood turned to ice. He pushed his chair back. The wheels screeched against the polished floor, but no one flinched. Something was very, very wrong. He stood, glancing at the door. Maybe it was some sort of power issue. Maybe the screens had glitched, and they were all looking at the same frozen frame of some presentation. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. He took a slow step back, then another. His shoes barely made a sound on the carpeted floor, but suddenly, the room shifted again. The table seemed longer than before. The windows looked darker, as if the city outside had disappeared into a void. The walls narrowed. A suffocating silence pressed down on him. Then, someone finally moved. Not one of the executives. The man at the far end of the table. The one who had given him the folder. Slowly, almost deliberately, the man lifted his head. His movements were too precise, too calculated, as if every muscle was carefully controlled. The millionaire swallowed, forcing himself to speak. "What's going on?" The man smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "You came," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "That's what matters." The millionaire clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The man ignored the question. Instead, he gestured toward the folder still lying on the table. "You should read it," he said. Something about the way he said it made the millionaire's skin crawl. He took a step back. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm leaving." He turned toward the exit, but the door was gone. Panic flared through him. His chest tightened as he scanned the walls. No exit. No windows. No sign of the world outside. This was no longer a boardroom. This was a trap. The air grew thick, as if the very room was closing in around him. And then the voices began. Soft at first. Murmurs, whispers that echoed inside his head, rising and falling like a distant storm. Then, one voice cut through the rest, clear, commanding. "Sit down." He turned back, heart hammering. The man at the far end of the table was staring at him now, his eyes too dark, too empty. The millionaire's breath came fast and shallow. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. And yet, as he looked at the people frozen around the table, the flickering walls, and the void beyond the windows, he knew one thing for certain. He had made a terrible mistake. The millionaire's breath came fast and shallow. His pulse pounded in his ears, the air in the boardroom suddenly thick and suffocating. The man at the far end of the table, the only one who had spoken, was watching him with a piercing gaze. His presence was unsettling, something about him felt wrong. The other executives still sat perfectly still, their faces blank, their eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking. Something was terribly, terribly off. The millionaire clenched his fists, trying to steady his nerves. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. The man smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. "I," he said, folding his hands neatly on the table, "am someone who has been waiting for this meeting for a very long time." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine. "What is this?" he snapped. "Some kind of joke? A test? If you're trying to intimidate me, it's not going to work." The man's eyes gleamed with something dark. "This is no joke," he said simply. "And it is certainly no test. This is a reckoning." The millionaire's stomach twisted. "A reckoning? I don't have time for this," he growled, pushing back his chair. He turned toward the door. But the door was gone. A solid wall had replaced where the exit had been just moments ago. Panic flared in his chest. He spun back around, scanning the room, looking for another way out, but there were none. No doors. No windows. No escape. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "I was just..." The man at the far end of the table leaned forward. "Sit down," he said, his voice even but carrying an undeniable command. The millionaire hesitated, his heart slamming against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. Slowly, he lowered himself back into the chair, his fingers gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. The man exhaled as if pleased. "That's better," he said. The silence stretched between them, thick and unnatural. Finally, the millionaire spoke. "What do you want from me?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "The real question is," he said smoothly, "do you even remember why you're here?" The millionaire frowned. "I was called to this meeting," he said, his voice firm. "For business. For an important deal." The man chuckled. "Ah, yes," he said. "Business." He reached for the thick folder in front of him, the same one he had slid across the table earlier. His fingers drummed lightly on the cover. "Go ahead," he said. "Take a look." A sharp, uneasy tension coiled in the millionaire's gut. "Don't sign anything." His nurse's warning echoed in his head. Louder now. More urgent. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "I'm not reading anything until you explain what's going on." The man tapped the folder again, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said. "Let's make this easier for you." And then, he snapped his fingers. The lights flickered. The walls blurred. And suddenly, the millionaire was somewhere else. The rich scent of cigar smoke and expensive whiskey filled the air. The faint murmur of voices buzzed around him. He knew this place. The pit in his stomach deepened as he turned his head, eyes scanning the elegant, dimly lit lounge. Then, he saw himself. A younger version of himself. Seated at a high-end private club, across from a woman whose face was etched with desperation. A lump formed in his throat. He remembered this night. He hadn't thought about it in years. The woman was pleading, begging him. Her voice trembled as she slid a stack of papers across the table toward his younger self. "Please," she whispered. "If you push this deal through, my company won't survive. Hundreds of people, families, will lose everything." His younger self had barely blinked. He had leaned back in his chair, taken a slow sip of his drink, and smiled. "Business is business," he had said coldly. Then, with a stroke of a pen, he had signed the contract. And with that signature, he had destroyed her company. Destroyed her life. The scene froze. The millionaire stared at it, his breath shallow, his fingers trembling. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. He turned back to the boardroom, back to the present, back to the man at the far end of the table. The man was watching him, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said softly, "do you understand why you're here?" The millionaire's breath came in ragged gasps. His mind screamed that this wasn't possible, that it couldn't be real, but he had seen it. The past. A moment he had buried, forgotten, erased from his conscience. But now, it had been forced back in front of him. His eyes flicked back to the mysterious man at the far end of the boardroom table. He still sat there, composed, watching him with an air of knowing amusement. The other executives remained still, lifeless figures frozen in place, their eyes staring into nothingness. The millionaire swallowed hard, his throat dry. His pulse thundered in his ears. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. The man smiled slightly, his fingers tapping against the table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. "You already know," he said. "No," the millionaire shot back. His voice was shaking now, and he hated that. He never lost control. "I don't. What kind of trick is this? Some kind of hallucination? A setup?" The man chuckled softly. "You think too small," he murmured. "This is no trick. No illusion. This is the consequence of your choices." A chill crawled down the millionaire's spine. He gritted his teeth. "That's ridiculous. I made decisions. Business decisions. I've done nothing illegal." "Illegal?" The man tilted his head. "You misunderstand. This isn't about the law. This is about what you've done." The air in the room shifted. It grew heavier. The millionaire felt something unseen pressing down on him, like an invisible weight settling on his chest. Then, the walls rippled. Like liquid, distorting, stretching, bending inward. The shadows in the corners of the room moved. The millionaire took a step back. "What the hell is happening?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the folder. "Read it," he said again. A sharp pain throbbed in the millionaire's temples. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to run, but there was nowhere to go. His nurse's warning echoed in his head once more. "Don't sign anything." He wasn't about to sign. But maybe if he just looked, he could figure out what was happening. Slowly, with shaking fingers, he flipped the folder open. The pages inside were blank. For a moment, confusion flickered in his mind. Then, before his eyes, words began appearing on the paper, one by one, in dark ink, as if an invisible hand were writing them. His stomach turned to ice as he read the words forming on the page. Company X acquisition, approved by, his name. Date, years ago. Status of employees after takeover, displaced. Number of families affected, 416. Company assets, liquidated. Final outcome, irreversible. The millionaire's vision blurred. He turned the page. More words materialized. More deals. More acquisitions. More lives ruined. One after another, listing every contract he had ever signed, every company he had dismantled, every person who had begged for mercy while he turned away. Hundreds. Thousands. The ink on the page looked like blood. "No," he whispered, his hands trembling. "No, this isn't, I didn't." He slammed the folder shut. The moment he did, the room lurched. The shadows twisted. The walls pulsed, expanding outward into nothingness. A void stretched around him, endless, suffocating. The boardroom was dissolving, breaking apart, fading. He staggered back, gripping the table for support. Then, the whispers started. At first, soft. A murmur, like a distant wind. Then louder. Clearer. Voices. Hundreds of voices. Screaming. Begging. Pleading. It was them. The people he had left behind. The people he had crushed in his rise to power. Their voices swarmed him, filled the air, rising into a deafening roar. His head pounded. His chest tightened. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the voices only grew louder. "Make it stop," he roared. Silence. Just like that, the noise vanished. The room returned to normal. The walls were back. The boardroom was still. The executives remained frozen in place. Only the man at the far end of the table was smiling. The millionaire's breathing was ragged, his hands clammy. His knees almost buckled. But then he realized, something had changed. The folder was gone. Instead, a single sheet of paper lay in front of him. And at the bottom of the page, a signature line. The man leaned forward. "This," he said, his voice velvety smooth, "is your last chance." The millionaire's throat closed. "What happens if I don't sign?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile widened. "Then you will stay here," he said. "Forever." The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. The millionaire stared at the single sheet of paper in front of him, his vision blurring from the weight of everything that had just happened. The voices. The shifting walls. The vanishing past resurfacing like a nightmare he couldn't escape. His breath came in shallow gasps. His name was printed at the bottom of the page. Above it, a single empty line. The man at the far end of the table was watching him with an eerie patience, his fingers drumming lightly on the polished wood. "This is your last chance," the man repeated, voice smooth and deliberate. "Sign it, and everything goes back to the way it was." The millionaire clenched his jaw. His instinct screamed at him that this was a trap. Something about this felt final. He swallowed hard. "What happens if I don't?" The man leaned forward, his dark eyes gleaming. "Then you stay here," he said softly. "Forever." A cold sweat broke out along the millionaire's spine. His fingers twitched against the table. "Stay here? Trapped in this room, this nightmare, for eternity?" His chest tightened. He wasn't sure what this place was, but he knew he couldn't stay. He had to get out. But at what cost? His eyes flickered back to the contract. The words on the page shifted, changing before his eyes. "I accept full responsibility for my past. I acknowledge the weight of my choices. And I offer what is due in return." His breath hitched. "I don't understand," he whispered. "What am I giving up?" The man's smile never faltered. "Nothing you haven't already lost." The words sent a shiver through him. He looked around at the frozen executives, the dim lighting, the unnatural stillness of the room. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But if it wasn't, then why did it feel so terribly real? His hands curled into fists. "I don't sign anything without reading the fine print," he said coldly. The man exhaled through his nose, as if amused. "Oh, but you already have," he said. "You signed it the day you made your first choice. The day you put profits before people. The day you told yourself that nothing mattered but winning." The millionaire's throat went dry. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. This isn't how it works. I made business decisions. That's all. No different from any other corporate leader. It's just the way things are." The man's smile widened. "Yes," he said. "And that is why you are here." The walls rippled again. The room darkened. Suddenly, the voices returned. Not as screams this time. As whispers. Soft, murmuring voices, circling the air around him, brushing against his ears. He could hear them speaking his name. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping his head. "Make it stop. Make it stop. Enough," he roared. The whispers vanished. He opened his eyes. And the room was different. No longer a boardroom. It was his office. His penthouse office, with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the breathtaking skyline. His desk. His chair. His paintings. Everything was back. For a split second, relief flooded his chest. It was over. Had it been a hallucination? A dream? He let out a shaking breath. His fingers touched the surface of his desk, solid and real beneath them. Then, movement caught his eye. His heart stopped. Someone was sitting in the chair across from him. The man from the boardroom. Sitting there, perfectly at ease. Like he had been waiting for him. The millionaire's blood ran cold. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't possible." The man smiled. "Oh, but it is." The millionaire stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of papers. His mind raced. He had escaped. He had left that place. Hadn't he? His eyes darted around the office. The city skyline was outside the windows. The familiar sound of distant traffic hummed below. But something felt wrong. He turned slowly. And then he saw it. The single sheet of paper. Still on his desk. Still blank, except for the signature line. His name printed at the bottom. His breath caught in his throat. No. No, no, no. The man at the chair tilted his head. "You didn't really think it would be that easy, did you?" The millionaire's stomach dropped. He wasn't free. He had never left. And now, he finally understood. There was no escaping this. The millionaire's pulse hammered in his ears. His chest rose and fell in quick, uneven breaths. He was back in his office. Or at least, it looked like his office. The skyline outside stretched endlessly, the same cityscape he had seen 1,000 times before. His desk, his expensive leather chair, his carefully curated collection of paintings, all exactly as they should be. But something wasn't right. Because he wasn't alone. The man from the boardroom sat across from him, calm and collected, watching him with those impossibly dark eyes. And in front of the millionaire, lying neatly on his desk, was the contract. Still unsigned. Still waiting. The realization chilled him to the bone. He hadn't escaped. He had never left. His fingers twitched at his sides. This isn't real," he muttered under his breath. "I'm dreaming. Hallucinating. Someone drugged me." The man gave a small, amused chuckle. "Oh," he mused. "And if that were true, would it change anything?" The millionaire's jaw clenched. His thoughts spiraled, desperately clawing for an explanation that made sense. This wasn't possible. It wasn't logical. He was in control. He had always been in control. And yet, nothing about this felt like a hallucination. The air was too thick. The shadows too deep. The presence of the man too real. His fingers curled into fists. "Why me?" he demanded. "There are thousands, millions, of businessmen out there who have done worse than I have. Why am I the one sitting here?" The man exhaled, tapping his fingers against the armrest of his chair. "Why do you assume this is only happening to you?" The words sent a slow, creeping shudder down the millionaire's spine. For the first time, he realized. What if he wasn't the only one? What if there were others? Other powerful men, sitting in their own grand offices, facing their own reckoning? The thought terrified him. The man leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk. "But your situation," he continued, "is rather unique." The millionaire swallowed hard. "How?" The man smiled, that eerie, knowing smile. "Because you were warned." The words hit him like a bullet. His nurse. Her urgent warning. "Don't go. Don't sign anything." His blood turned to ice. She had known. He felt sick. How? How had she known? As if reading his thoughts, the man spoke again. "She tried to stop you," he mused. "And yet, here you are." The millionaire's breathing grew shallow. His hands trembled at his sides. The warning had been real. And he had ignored it. The weight of the moment crushed him. He was a man who prided himself on seeing through deception, on being 2 steps ahead of everyone else. And yet, when it had mattered most, he had walked straight into a trap. His knees threatened to buckle. He turned back to the contract, staring at the empty signature line. Was this the price? His punishment for a lifetime of choices? His mind reeled. What happens if I sign? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's expression remained unreadable. You'll go back, he said simply. Back? Back to what? His life? His business? His wealth? Or something else entirely? The millionaire licked his dry lips. And if I don't? The man's dark gaze didn't waver. Then you stay here. The word settled into the air like a death sentence. A heavy, unbearable weight. The millionaire's breathing grew ragged. No escape. No way out. This wasn't a choice. It was a cage. His hands shook as he reached for the pen. His fingers brushed the cool metal, hesitating. Something deep inside him screamed, a last, desperate instinct, warning him to stop. But it was too late. He had already made his choice the moment he stepped into that boardroom. With a final, shuddering breath, he pressed the pen to the paper. And everything collapsed. The instant the pen touched the paper, the world collapsed. The walls of his office shattered into darkness. The city skyline outside the windows vanished, swallowed by an infinite black void. The ground beneath his feet trembled like an earthquake ripping through reality itself. A deafening roar filled his ears, like rushing wind, like collapsing steel, like the very fabric of existence tearing apart. The millionaire's breath caught in his throat. His fingers went numb. The pen slipped from his grasp, falling soundlessly into the abyss. He had made a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. No. His mind screamed for him to take it back, to undo what he had just done. But it was too late. The moment the ink touched the contract, his fate had been sealed. Then everything stopped. Total, unbearable silence. The darkness around him thinned, shifting like mist before revealing his penthouse office. Perfect. Untouched. As if nothing had ever happened. He was back. His desk sat in front of him, pristine. The skyline stretched beyond the massive windows. The soft hum of the city filled the air. It was over. A long, shuddering breath escaped his lips. Had it all been a dream? His gaze darted around the room, searching, but the man was gone. The contract was gone. The shadows were gone. Everything was normal. He let out a breathless chuckle. His legs felt weak. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. A dream. A nightmare. It had to be. Nothing else made sense. But then. A soft knock at the door. His breath caught in his throat. The door. The one that had disappeared. His fingers clenched the armrests of his chair as the knock sounded again. He shouldn't open it. Every instinct in his body screamed at him not to. But he had to. Slowly, too slowly, he stood and crossed the room, his footsteps deafening against the marble floor. He reached for the handle, his breath shallow. And then. He pulled the door open. A sharp gasp left his lips. Standing in the hallway, her face pale and tense, was his nurse. She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "You signed it," she whispered. His blood ran cold. She knew. His hands shook. What happened?" he asked hoarsely. Her lips pressed into a tight line. "You shouldn't have done that." His stomach dropped. She took a small step forward. "You think you're back," she murmured. That it's over? A sinking feeling twisted in his gut. It's not, she said. The room dimmed. A shadow moved behind her. A tall, familiar silhouette. The man from the boardroom. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. Welcome home. The world tilted. The shadows swallowed him whole. The darkness swallowed him whole. A crushing weight pressed down on his chest, as if unseen hands were dragging him through the void. His breath hitched, he couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. He was somewhere else. The air smelled sterile, like antiseptic and cold steel. He was standing in a hospital room. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The white walls were eerily blank, stretching endlessly in both directions. The bed in the center of the room was occupied. A frail old man lay there, hooked up to beeping monitors, his breathing shallow. The millionaire's heart skipped. Because he recognized this room. He had been here before. Years ago. A sharp chill ran down his spine. His mouth opened, but no words came out. You remember, don't you? The smooth voice behind him sent a bolt of terror through his body. He turned, slowly. The man from the boardroom stood just behind him, hands clasped neatly behind his back. Watching. Waiting. The millionaire swallowed hard. His chest tightened. His throat was dry. This was my father's room. The man nodded. Yes. The last time you were here, you had a choice to make. The words sent a sharp, painful memory rushing back. He had been standing right here, in this very spot. His father, once a powerful businessman, had been dying. The doctors had told him there was still a chance, if only they approved a risky surgery. But the decision had been his. And he had chosen to walk away. He had seen his father's failing health as weakness. A liability. A drain on resources. The moment he had signed the paperwork denying treatment, he had also signed the final chapter of his father's life. A deal. A transaction. Just like all the others. The air thickened around him. His chest tightened. No. He had moved on. He had built an empire. This wasn't his fault. The man's voice cut through the silence. Would you make the same choice again? The words sent a shudder through him. He turned away. I did what I had to do. You did what was easiest, the man corrected. The millionaire's fists clenched at his sides. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I'm not going to stand here and... Beep. The heart monitor spiked. He turned back to the bed. His father's eyes were open. Watching him. A strangled noise left his throat. No. This wasn't possible. The body on the bed shouldn't be moving. But the old man sat up, his frail form trembling, his sunken eyes locked onto his son's. And then... he spoke. You left me, his father rasped. The words sent a knife of ice straight through the millionaire's chest. His pulse pounded. This isn't real, he whispered. The old man tilted his head. Isn't it? The lights flickered. The walls rippled. His father's eyes darkened. You left all of us, he whispered. And then the room was full of people. The woman from the failed company. The employees he had fired without warning. The families whose lives he had crushed. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes hollow, their faces staring straight at him. Unmoving. Waiting. The pressure in his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. This isn't real, he repeated, desperately. The man at his side only smiled. Neither were the lives you ruined, he said simply. And yet, that didn't stop you. The millionaire stumbled back, his breathing ragged. The walls around him stretched, closing in. No escape. No way out. His father's voice echoed, haunting. You left us. The millionaire squeezed his eyes shut. No. No, no, no. He had built his empire on logic, power, control. He had never let emotions get in the way. Had he? His hands shook. His father's voice was softer now. It's not too late, son. His breath hitched. The room flickered. The people watching him blurred. For the first time in his life, a new thought entered his mind. Was it too late? Was there still a choice left to make? The man beside him leaned in, whispering. The final decision is yours. And then, everything vanished. The world vanished. One moment, the millionaire was surrounded by the ghosts of his past, their hollow eyes burning into him, their silent judgment suffocating. The next. Darkness. Silence. For a terrifying moment, he thought he had been swallowed whole. That this was his fate, an endless void, a purgatory of his own making. Then, slowly, a faint sound emerged. A steady beeping. His heart lurched. It was familiar. A heart monitor. His father's heart monitor. And just like that, he was back in the hospital room. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nose. His father lay in bed, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in shallow, steady breaths. Alive. The millionaire staggered back. His hands trembled. His head spun. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. Because his father had died. Hadn't he? Then. A movement. His father's eyes fluttered open. Their gazes met. For the first time in his life, the millionaire saw something in his father's eyes he had never noticed before. Not power. Not control. Not disappointment. Sadness. A deep, quiet sadness. A realization hit him like a crushing weight. It had never been about business. Never about winning. His father had wanted something far simpler. Something the millionaire had never given him. Time. Love. A son who cared more about people than power. The regret slammed into him so hard it nearly knocked him over. His throat tightened. His hands curled into fists. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to take back every cold decision, every moment of neglect. But before he could, the world blurred. He was back. In his office. At his desk. A deep breath shuddered through him. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The skyline outside his window stretched out in golden streaks of morning light. The city below hummed with life. He reached for his phone. The time read, 6:42 a.m. His fingers trembled as he scrolled. The meeting. It had never happened. No boardroom. No contract. No shadowy figure. His breath hitched. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? Then, a knock at the door. His stomach dropped. Slowly, carefully, he stood and crossed the room. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he turned the handle. The door swung open. And standing there, just as she had before, was his nurse. Her expression was tense, searching. "You're still here," she whispered. His blood turned cold. She knew. He took a step back, gripping the doorframe. His voice barely worked. It was real. The nurse nodded slowly. "You were given a chance," she said softly. "The question is, what are you going to do with it?" For the first time in his life, the millionaire didn't have an answer. Not because he didn't know what to do. but because, for the first time ever, he was ready to change. He picked up his phone, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, with a deep breath, he called the one number he had ignored for years. His father's. As the dial tone rang, he felt something shift inside him. Something lighter. Something human. Because in the end, all the wealth in the world meant nothing, if you had no one to share it with.